Scotland, one of the last remaining wilderness areas of Britain, famed for its rugged landscape, broken up by vast lochs, raging rivers and large forests. Even on the worst of days, there is much beauty to this wild land. With so much water, it is no surprise that canoeists from across the world come here to conquer some of the famous expeditions. Join us on this adventure as we partake in the Great Glen Canoe Trail and raise money for the Alzheimer's Society, which helps to raise money for research, treatment and support for those families affected by dementia. The Great Glen comprises of 60 miles of water, starting from Fort William on the west coast and finishing in Inverness on the northeast coast. This coast-to-coast expedition sees us take on vast open lochs, a Grade 2 river and 22 miles of the Caledonian Canal. I am joined on this trip by 11 other keen outdoorsmen, who I will talk about later in the episode. I have put links to their social media in the description below. Our journey starts at Neptune's Staircase in Benavie, a series of 8 lochs built by Thomas Telford. It is the longest staircase loch in Britain and was originally hand-powered. Welcome to day 1 of the Great Glen trip. I'm here with a group of lads and we're raising money for the Alzheimer's Society. And I'm going to put a link in the description below for those that wish to donate to the cause. It's a nice day. Temperature's not too hot, probably around 18, 17 degrees. And the wind is lovely. It's in the west at the moment. And that's only at about 5 or 6 miles an hour. Really, we don't want it swinging around anything past northeast, because then it's going to go right in our face and it's going to make the trip a lot harder. So we're laden with gear in the canoes, and we've got a couple of miles. We're on the Caledonian Canal, and at the moment we've got a couple of miles before we get to the first loch, which I believe is Loch Lochy. Thanks so much for joining me on this trip, guys. I appreciate it. I'll tell you who I'm with in a bit, but first I've got to rack up some mileage because the others are, well, we're quite spread out at the moment, so the others are about a quarter of a mile ahead and some are behind as well. So cheers for watching, and I'll catch you guys in a bit. A number of us brought fishing rods with us along the trip, and it wasn't long before Matty from Magpie Woods hooked into the first fish of the expedition, a small pike. After a few hours of gentle paddling along the Caledonian Canal, we made it to Glen Lochy, which was our first portage of the trip. As the boats we are using are heavy, averaging 30 kilos, and laden with gear, we decided on using portage trolleys to manoeuvre our gear in one. The portage itself was only 100 metres or so, and it was on a gravel track, which made it fairly easy to move the canoes. We decided to use this portage to stop for lunch, and then it was quickly back into the boats and time to conquer our first open water loch, Loch Lochy. Just rigged the rod up. This is a little 5-piece rod, and then I've got basically a little spinner there, which I'll show you in a minute close up. Unfortunately, I broke the rod tip, which you may have seen in that video earlier. If not, I broke it on a rock, just casting, not on the trip, just before we left actually. So I've got the tip section, which I'm going to try and whip back together and super glue. But yeah, we're just going to fish with it like that. So I'm not really going to cast, I'm just going to troll it behind me. This is Glen Lochy, where we've just gone through. We're going to stop for a bit of lunch. Nice pretty setting though. Get some lunch on, and then we're going to crack on and try and get the majority, or pretty much halfway up Loch Lochy. Another 8 kilometres, probably 7-8 kilometres paddling, and yeah, that should get us to a good, apparently there's a good campsite kind of halfway up or something like that, so we can have some level ground to put the tents up. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Loch Lochy, the first loch of the trip. So we're paddling northeast pretty much. We've just come into the loch. There are fish pens in a few of the lochs that we were paddling, and we decided to fish around these in the hope that there would be some big fish lurking around them. However, with the wind in the west picking up, it wasn't long before the weather changed. When paddling large open water, it's important to stick fairly close to the shoreline in case the weather changes and you need to make a last-minute dash to the safety of the shore. The weather here in Scotland can change fast, but none of us quite expected it to change this quickly. After roughly 16 miles of paddling, it was time to pull in for the night and camp midway up Loch Lochy. We found a cracking campsite with stunning views at both ends of the loch. Okay, weather has changed a bit again. We've had some showers, but we're going to head back out I think in a minute and just the final paddle of the day and try and get to this campsite and hopefully get the tents up and stuff. But the forecast is just showers coming in, and they come in quite fast here. What a trip. We just saw the most incredible rainbow. Hopefully I got the footage of that, but I've never seen one so, it's kind of so low, but also all the colours, and you can see end to end where it was starting and beginning. It's just, I've never seen anything like it. It was, I don't think the camera's going to do that justice, but it was amazing. What a trip so far. Loving it. It's only the first day. Well, that's it for the day. Made it to the campsite, campsite 1, after a really nice paddle along Loch Lochy, and the wind picked up towards the end, which was kind of handy in a way because it's behind us and it pushed us into shore. The only downside is when it died off as we were just setting up our tents, all the midges came up and they were bad. So you probably saw shots, but we've all got bug shirts on. So for those that don't know, the bug shirt does that, and it zips up as well to keep the buggers out like that. Yeah, not very fashionable, I know. I look like a beekeeper, but to be honest, would rather look like that than have the little blighters eating away, and they did get me before I put it on, annoyingly. So yeah, that's the only downside of this spot, but what a day. It's been such a nice paddle, and I've just set up the tent. We're gonna get some food on, get a nice smoky fire on as well to keep those midges at bay, and just sit around the campfire talking stories and just enjoy the evening. It's been a really nice day, really enjoyable. So Simon from Simon a Bloke in the Woods got his the epic sail he's made, and he was flying down towards the end. So if you go and check his channel out, I'm sure he's got some awesome footage of that. But that was great to watch. I was paddling my arse off and Simon just whew, straight past. So anyway, we'll get some food on, but this scenery is, I mean, look at this. This island bit, this spit of land on peninsula, gets a bit of a battering from the wind, from the westerlies and the southwesterlies. But absolutely awesome. Not too sure, there's some larch up there I think. But it looks, yeah, I mean they're big conifers, bit of larch, possibly some Douglas fir, and you can see these ones that have just been destroyed by the winds. This is a small one compared to some of them near camp. All of my food is packed into Ziploc bags, because obviously if they get into the water they'll get damp and it could ruin them, and then a lot of the food is sealed anyway in a bag, and then each pack has the day number on it. So this is day 1, and I've rationed myself snacks, main meals, drinks, and that's pretty much it for each day. And I've also got an emergency day 6 in case we have to camp out for the extra day if the weather gets bad on probably Loch Ness. But that's it. I've gone through some of this today, but we've got one more meal left. I had the breakfast, what was it, the all day English breakfast earlier, so tonight is chicken casserole. So this tree, this dead tree, is full of old man's beard, essentially moss. Looks like an old man's beard. Really good tinder fire starter. It's kind of a flash tinder, so I'm just going to get some of this and maybe we'll get the twig stove going with that. That's nice. I mean, it doesn't look appealing after a full day's paddling. I like that. But actually, in my midge kit, if I can find it, it's my midge kit. I've got quite a few insect repellents, soil one, repel and smidge, but also I whacked in and also some Nordic Summer. But with the Nordic Summer, which obviously stinks as well, I've actually got some citronella candles, so I'm going to light one right outside the tent, not too near it, and just see if it makes a difference to the buggers, because they're bloody everywhere. Morning all. Day 2. And I did not have a good sleep last night. Slept really well the first night. I said the first night, the night before we left. But last night was just a shocker. So I was a bit too close to the water, as lovely as it is. I think it just kept me up a little bit more than I wanted to. Got some porridge this morning and a cup of tea. So day 2, we're in the water and we're going to do the rest of Loch Lochy. It's about I want to say we've got about 5 to 7 miles to, probably 7 miles to Loch Oich. And I think the plan is to camp halfway up Loch Oich. If not, we could plough on through and maybe do a bit more of the Caledonian Canal and get to Fort Augustus, which is basically the point before Loch Ness, which is the big one on the last 2 days. It's going to take 2 days to do Loch Ness, and yeah, that's going to be a fun one, because it'll be right at the end of the trip when we're probably pretty fatigued and tired, but at the same time, like, your muscles are a bit used to that muscle memory of paddling, and your skills by that day are definitely improved from day 1. So I guess it could work in our favour, who knows. Slightly windier conditions to start off with today, and also not as much sun as yesterday, but we're all out. A couple of the boys have got sails going. I can see behind me, you might not be seeing on the camera, Simon, the bloke in the woods, has got his sail up, making me exceedingly jealous because he's burning half the calories than I am, but fair play to him, it's a cracking sail. Here he comes, boys. Simon, a bloke in the woods. Simon, a bloke on the loch. There he is, the white sail of doom, about to rip past me, sapping all my motivation for the day. Here he goes. A beautiful bait.
Lazy man's canoe.
Look at this. Loch Lochy is 9 miles long and is the 3rd deepest loch in Scotland. Having now paddled the remaining few miles to the north shore of the loch, it was time for another short portage up Lagan Lochs. I felt myself getting into the rhythm of the trip now, setting up the trolley, portaging the gear, launching the canoe. It was all becoming more familiar, and the tasks that would normally take a while were completed much faster. I was beginning to get familiar with the efficiency of multi-day expeditions. So we then paddled on to the next part of the trip, which was another section of the Caledonian Canal. I did notice that this part of the canal was much more rugged and scenic than the opening section, probably because we were now further away from the larger towns and populations at the start of the trip. It wasn't long before the trees made way for the open water of Loch Oich, a stunning loch that marks the highest point of the Caledonian Canal. When Thomas Telford was commissioned to create the Caledonian Canal in 1803, he artificially raised the level of Loch Oich so that it would be navigable by the larger ships. Both Loch Lochy and Loch Ness were already deep enough. This loch holds a fair amount of history to it. Halfway along, the ruined Invergarry Castle rises above the trees. Reportedly, Bonnie Prince Charlie took refuge here after the Battle of Culloden in 1746. The Redcoats burned the castle after the battle, but the stout walls refused to yield. In the shadow of the castle lies the shipwreck of Alabun, the Gaelic term meaning white swan. Apparently, the vessel has been anchored on the loch over winter, protected from the prevailing southwesterly storms that blow through the loch. However, the owners hadn't accounted for a vicious northeasterly, which blasted through the valley. Eventually, she dragged all 3 anchors until she gave up the fight and was blown on the shore, only to remain now as a shipwreck. And this is how she has been ever since, 14 years later, still fairly intact.
Hey Mike!
How you doing, you alright?
Cracking yet?
Yeah, you guys must have had a hell of a line this morning.
Yeah, we were a bit slow, weren't we? Yeah, we've taken it a bit easier today,
Yeah.
which has been nice, but the weather's great to us, so.
Oh, it's fantastic. How was it last night though?
About whenever it was 5 PM or 4 PM when the last hour of paddling was just downpour,
Yeah.
but it added to the atmosphere of doing it, which was great. And then the actual night was fine, a little bit breezy, but then the breeze stopped and all the midges come up.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't really win with the midges. We tried, we got a smoky fire going in the end, that helped. But no, it was, to be fair, we were so lucky with the weather.
It's been great today. So I'll take care.
Yeah, you have a great trip.
So I look forward to seeing the video.
Cheers, yeah, there'll be plenty of content. Thanks guys, have a good one. That is without doubt one of the smallest pike I've seen. Lovely looking thing though, lovely markings. The trees that line the shore on this loch were far more broadleaf, hazels, birches and oak, a stark contrast to the pines, cedars and larches of Loch Lochy. This broadleaf woodland was rich with life. Nearby, a patch of mint was growing by the stream. Mint has high levels of vitamin A, a fat-soluble vitamin that is critical for eye health and night vision. It has also been proven to help alleviate the issues of digestive tract disorders like IBS. For me, it was just nice to have a cup of warm mint tea after a long day's paddling. Gone for a bit more carbs today just to get the energy up for the bigger paddles which are further on in the trip. So I had pasta, Cajun pasta before this, now doubling up with some pasta bolognese as well. Got to get those carbs in. We've got a campfire going now though, which is good. Keep the bugs away. During the evenings, we all sat round a campfire, shared stories and reflected on the trip. I used the last of the daylight hours to try a temporary fix on my broken fishing rod. I whittled a very thin stick to an almost toothpick size and slid this down the ferrule of the rod. I then slid the other half of the rod over this stick. This just helps to give this broken section a bit of rigidity. Then, using some braid from the reel, I whipped over this and added a coating of superglue to finish it off, gently rotating it in front of the fire to help it dry evenly. A fairly basic fix, but enough to get by for the rest of the trip until I could get home to mend it properly. And then darkness approached and we retired to our tents to gain sleep ready for the paddle the next day. After a good night's sleep and a warm drink by the fire, I woke to the sound of Ginger doing his shoulder exercises. We broke down camp and started to head out for the third day of paddling. we're going to do a river section, the River Oich, which I'm very excited about. We were originally going to do the canal, more of the Caledonian Canal, but there is the River Oich which runs parallel to it. So we're going to give that a crack. Grade 2 maybe, I think, at best. So not kind of, you know, extreme, but should be good fun. Probably paddle that for an hour and a half or so till we get to Fort Augustus, and that's where we'll camp for the next night, because after that is the big Loch Ness. This is awesome. As we were already halfway along Loch Oich, there wasn't far to paddle before we got to the end of it. It was here that we made the decision to enter the River Oich and paddle this down to Fort Augustus, instead of paddling the Caledonian Canal. And so our Great Glen adventure continued in what was another amazing day. The River Oich is roughly 5.5 miles long and runs parallel to the Caledonian Canal. It carries water from Loch Oich all the way to Loch Ness. There are a number of rapids along the way which are great fun, with 2 main rapids that are grade 2. Having paddled the famous River Spey in the Cairngorms, I have to admit that I was not expecting much from the River Oich. But how wrong I was. This river was absolutely stunning, with a few technical rapids thrown in and a beautiful backdrop of wild forests. It was some of the best river paddling I've had the pleasure of doing. After a few hours on the river, we pulled in for a lunch stop near one of the main rapids. So we've just had a break from the rapids, and it feels like we've arrived at Lord of the Rings, or a set for Lord of the Rings. Massive Douglas fir, absolutely huge, and just moss everywhere in this shaded like woodland. It's just a really, really pretty sight. Rapids were awesome, a couple of grade 2, especially one just now where we finished. We're going to just have a bite to eat and then paddle on down the River Oich even more, but I have to admit I'm more impressed with the River Oich than I thought I would be. Having done the River Spey, which is arguably one of the kind of most scenic rivers to paddle in Britain, I would say some of the sections on this River Oich are up there in terms of scenery. It's very, very pretty. Beauty. Beauty spot. I mean, I could camp here quite easily and not come back home. Wow.
Feeling re-energised from our swim in the river, we launched the boats and headed off downstream towards Fort Augustus. We spent the next hour or so in Fort Augustus, eating some lunch and taking in the scenery. And from here, as we paddled under the last bridge, the horizon opened up and the vastness that was Loch Ness was now apparent.
There she is, Loch Ness. Big paddle ahead. We've got about 2 days to paddle it, which should be enough time. But first we're going to find a campsite. The wind, I don't know if you can see, is absolutely awesome. There's barely any, but it's going down that way, which is what we want.
At 22 miles long and 230 metres deep, Loch Ness is the largest loch in Scotland by volume. Loch Moray is the deepest, and Loch Lomond is the largest by surface area. Many people from around the world come to visit this loch to see if they can spot the elusive Loch Ness monster, or Nessie as it's referred to up here. We stuck to the east shoreline of the loch and paddled with the tailwind. There are a number of hidden secret places along Loch Ness, and knowing that it was going to take us 2 days to paddle it, we were sure to do as much exploring as we could. With camp set up, we enjoyed time around the campfire, talking stories and eating some of the fresh brown trout that Matty had caught earlier in the day. It wasn't long before we were asleep. We needed the energy for the epic paddle that we had planned for the next day.
You join us here on day 4. We are just getting the gear in the canoes. Wind's fresher today, definitely. There's some little white caps out on the loch, but going the right direction, straight across it, or straight along it, behind us, so it shouldn't take too long to get to where we want to be at the next campsite. It's quite a bit windier today. Luckily it's behind us. Some of the lads have set up their sails a can't see them yet. They've not come around the headland. But yeah, we're just cracking on. We've done about 2 hours paddling, do another hour maybe, and then stop for some lunch. Just waiting to see some sails coming past, but nothing yet. So paddle power is doing well.
It was evident that the wind was much stronger today. The loch had a swell forming, and the fetch of the waves got larger as we paddled further down the lake. I trimmed the boat so that the weight was all near the stern, to allow the bow to be as high up as possible. This is so that the tailwind would catch the bow and help to push me forward in the direction we needed to go. It worked well, and within just a few hours we were nearly at the halfway point on the loch. Myself and Matt from Adventurers Made pulled into shore to have a lunch break. In the distance we could see 2 canoes lashed together and a large tarp used as a sail made by Rick and his son Jack. Simon from A Bloke in the Woods also made quick work of the loch with his sail, despite having a large crack in the hull of his boat from the rapids earlier on. For 3 more hours, myself and Matt paddled along the shoreline, keeping an eye out for spaces to camp. The problem being that on this side of Loch Ness, there is very limited flat ground to camp. As afternoon turned into evening, we pushed on in the hope that around each headland there would be a decent place to stop for the night. It wasn't until another hour or so that we finally found somewhere big enough for the group to pitch up.
So we've made camp after probably the toughest days paddling yet. 4 days in, we decided to do the biggest stint on Loch Ness. Made a good setup. We found a lovely little glade area. We've got a good fire pit over there. It's a bit windy, so apologies for that in the microphone. Just quickly, the sleep setup that I'm doing. I've got a Trekology pillow with Thermarest Neo Air sleeping pad and the Corinthia TSS inner sleeping bag. It's like a sort of three season sleeping bag, and that way it's fairly warm. It's a fairly warm setup, but it does get quite chilly at night, especially here on the loch with the winds coming in. There's some quite cold temperatures where the water's so cool throughout the year. It's quite it always stays fairly chilly at night, so that's why I've got the 3 season bag. And that's the setup. The way that goes on with the elastic strap is there's a sleeping pad. Just wrap it around the top end like that, and then it sits on the sleeping pad, which for me is a bit of a game changer. I think I'm a bit late to the game with these pillows and the way they fit, and I know you can get this like sleeve sock thing that can go over the whole kind of top area of your mat as well, which makes it even more secure. But for me, that's a game changer for me, so really pleased with that. I didn't think it was too expensive either, so I'll put a link in the description to I'll put links in the description to kind of everything about this trip in terms of gear and what we did, and just the trip itself. As much information as I can I'll put in the description below, so you'll probably find out if you've got any questions. Check the description below. So that just goes straight in, and then the sleeping bag obviously on top. Oh, and the tent's the Snugpak Scorpion 2, which I've found has been pretty good so far actually. Got a little vestibule area here. It's only small though, the vestibule area, that's the downside. And it's dark inside. British company as well, Snugpak. But the vestibule area, the downside is it's a little bit small. It's more good in bad weather actually, this tent, like storms and stuff, it's really handy for, but I would say it's a little bit small. But it's good enough for gear and things and cooking. And then inside, I'll boost that as much as I can. It's fairly, I'm a short guy and my Thermarest is touching the end there already, just so people know, with about that much room. But you can tighten and adjust it all here, so you can pull it closer and further away from the sides so they don't touch. It is an outer setup first, which is what I wanted on this trip. I wanted to be able to set the outer part of the tent up, because if it's raining then the inner doesn't get wet. I know a lot of the modern ultralight tents is inner first, and I didn't really want that. So lots of storage space with mesh storage all along the sides everywhere. Little breathing vents over there and here to each side, and there's a hook just underneath here, just there, for a light. Spacious enough for one and gear. I think it says 2 people, but it would be very tight. 2 people with the gear would have to be in the vestibule, but I'm happy with that. It's a good setup. So I figure to save some gas, I'm going to use the twig stove, collect some dry wood, and it just helps save some gas. And it also, the smoke from that little twig stove helps to keep the midges at bay, but temporarily. But the breeze has been nice, so they're not actually too bad. This whole trip we've been really lucky.
As the darkness enveloped the loch for the last night of our trip, I couldn't help but reflect on the sheer vastness of this magnificent piece of water. Memories of the beginning of the trip came flooding back. That first portage onto the canal seemed so long ago. Looking back at the fading horizon, I felt privileged to be here, on this expedition, with such a great group of people.
Well, that behind me is the other end of Loch Ness, which you can't even see because it's about 20 miles away. I believe the loch is 22 miles roughly. We've done a lot of paddling yesterday, which was really good because today is a nice gentle, look how flat it is. I mean, how often are you going to see pretty much the biggest body of water in Britain this still? Freshwater, that is. Look at it. It's an absolute pleasure to paddle. It wasn't so much yesterday, it was tough, but this is stunning. Just amazing. Very, very, I don't know, eye-opening trip, really. Incredible trip. Don't get me wrong, we've been lucky with the weather. Spoke to quite a few people who've attempted this expedition and the weather's totally turned on them. Ginge, who's a guy on our expedition who's with us, he's attempted this expedition twice, and twice he's got to the beginning of Loch Ness and he's had to cancel and turn around and not been able to complete it. So this is his 3rd attempt, and as you can imagine, he's absolutely buzzing to be finishing it finally. So really excited for him as well. Still watching this far into the video, I appreciate it. I do. Thank you guys. Remember, there's a link in the description to still donate to the cause.
The final part of our journey will see us finish the majestic Loch Ness and enter into the tiny Loch Dochfour. the last loch in the Great Glen, and the opening to the final section of the Caledonian Canal. Just before the end of this loch, I hooked into a fish. Fish on. Could be my biggest of the trip. That was a bigger pike this time, I think, or was it trout? Oh! Come off at the boat! Sadly, it wasn't meant to be. We had one final portage, just a short one, but long enough to need to deploy the trolley again. At this point, at least our canoes were slightly lighter from the food we had eaten throughout the trip. Entering into the canal for the very last time, we gently paddled on to our destination point. And so, here our journey ends. 5 days and 60 miles later, we completed the Great Glen Canoe Trail. Words cannot describe how brilliant this trip was. Not only was the scenery breathtaking, with the diversity of open lochs, canal and wild rivers, but the fantastic company, which was what made this trip what it was.
Done it! Back the other way.
I want to say a massive thank you to the lads that paddled with me on this expedition. Ant from Ant Survive the Night and his son Charlie, Rick T Outdoors and his son Jack, Simon, a bloke in the woods, Matt from Adventurers Made, Richard Outdoors and Simon Outdoors, Matty from Magpie Woods on Instagram, and Ginger Scarf, also on Instagram. You can follow the individual journeys of all of these guys that I have paddled with, and I would love it if you can head on over to their channels and give them a follow. And finally, if you have enjoyed following us along on this adventure, please do help us to support the cause and raise as much money as we can for the Alzheimer's Society. I have put a donation link in the description below. And so for now, to Scotland, I say goodbye. Thank you for providing me yet another incredible adventure, and for inspiring me to push on in the face of adversity. I will most certainly be back. And to you, the viewer, thank you for joining me on this adventure. I hope this film has helped to inspire you to get outdoors on an adventure of your own. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.